It's Bob Gardner, founder of the Freedom Specialist, and it is sprint time, 10 points in 10 minutes. Point number one, there is nothing nor has ever been anything wrong with you. I know it may feel like that way. I know you may feel like some broken, dried up little bit of twig compared to the rest of society that has brain. I know it's fall time, so these are all looking a little bit miserable. But I know it's felt like that way sometimes, but it doesn't feel like that all the time. So one, that's a feeling. It's not an actual physical fact about you. Two, you weren't born feeling that way. You learned to feel that way along the way in your life. You're walking along and then you learn to feel that way, and then somewhere along the way you got confused and you thought that the way you felt is who you are. Not the case. Point number two, you are not your past. You are not the events that have happened to you any more than a car down there on the road is the road construction it's driving through. You're not that. The car is not what the road construction is, and you are not the events that happened to you. And guess what? You were you before those events happened. Which means that all of the stuff that happened in your past, it doesn't define who you are. It only shaped your circumstances. This is important because too often we do something, we feel guilty or ashamed about it. We think that's just how I am or that's who I am, and that's not the case at all. What is the case, completely, is that you were you before any of that happened. And if you can tap into that, all the stuff that happened is just something that happened, just like all the times you went to the bathroom. It just happened, but that's not who you are. Point number three. Freedom is a skill, not a pill. Have you ever had anybody pull a knife on you? I had a teacher once who was like, what do you do when someone pulls a knife on you? And everybody says the same thing. Run. Okay, who here's a good runner? So they grab someone, he has a training knife, so it's blunt, fortunately, and they start taking off. Right? Within three steps, the guy was there, slashed him a couple of times. He's like, see, you assume a lot when you assume that you can run every time a knife is pulled. Right? You assume that there's no obstacle between you and the door. You assume the guy doesn't have a good throwing arm. You assume he's not faster than you. You assume you saw the knife in the first place. You assume you don't have buddies that you've got to protect or a family you got to protect. You assume he doesn't have buddies. There's a lot you assume. So it's better that you learn to deal with the knife. And the knife is everything in your life that is pokey and feels rough and miserable and is challenging and uncomfortable. Learn to deal with it so that if you can run, you do. But if you can't run, you deal with the knife. Number four. That was 8. 4. Thoughts are not things. Okay, what's this? This here you might call a log, you might call a branch, you might call a twig, whatever you did. The words that just came out of your mouth or that ran through your head are not the thing itself. If you can keep that separate, man, do you have a lot of leeway to find a totally different way of living. Here's where people run into trouble. Depression, anxiety, addiction, trauma. These have been talked about so much that they feel like things. But nowhere on the planet, in no laboratory anywhere across the wide globe has anyone, any scientist, any person ever, anywhere, found a molecule, an actual literal molecule of addiction, of trauma, of depression, of pain. There's no such thing. And if you can understand that, then what happens is, these are labels. Labels are lies. You stick them on top of the jar and they prevent you from seeing what's inside. You rip that label off and inside you can see what's actually going on. This is how I found a way to be free of addiction and depression and trauma and pain and all this stuff, suicidal ideation, all the stuff I was struggling with, and how it's helped so many thousands of people. We start by challenging the very notion that the things we're dealing with are the really what's going on. When you handle what's really there and not your thoughts about it, the things change, the thoughts change. Peekaboo. Yes. Hello. Number 5, trust your senses. Here's what happens. A lot of times, because we thought thoughts were things, we just trust our mind and our thoughts about stuff instead of what's actually going on. That's a question I want you to burn into yourself. What is actually happening? As if a camcorder or a video camera were looking at it. If you separate it out and go yeah, these feelings were there, and pull the feelings aside, that's great, we'll look at them later and go, what do you actually see? You will find that you do not see failure, you do not see success, you do not see guilt, you do not see shame. And when you really look with your own eyes and trust that will give you the information that you need to move forward. It's like going down into the basement. If you go down and you leave the lights off and you got to get to the other side of the room, you might run into the couch, you might run into so many other things. What do? You start reaching out with your senses so that you can see what's going on. Okay, there's something there. I probably shouldn't step there. Or you turn on the lights and all of a sudden you see, and now you can navigate. You don't have to think through the problem or anything. You automatically know what's going on when you can act, when you can see. But you've got to learn to trust your senses instead of your thoughts. Is my brain touching the outside world, folks? No. Number 6 is change your body state and you change your mind. Why? Because this brain, in order to know what's going on outside, all that information has to come through my body. And if my body is uncomfortable, if it's ill at ease, if I've had, I don't know, some sort of poisoned food that morning, or if I woke up, or I broke something, or I hurt something, or if I have trained a lifetime of stress and anxiety, and I have all these knots and these postural issues and these breathing issues and everything else, my brain hears that first, louder than anything on the outside world. So it doesn't matter if it's a happy thing. That's coming through the filter of all this discomfort. But if I change my body state, first to be neutral, and then to be abundant and effervescent and joyful, then everything that happens on the outside, even if people call it negative, it comes through joy. And you've changed your experience of it by changing your body, not the world. All right, guys, that brings us to number 7. Now that you've changed your body state, let's make it an instinct. Let's say, that's the instinct that people have when they run into stuff in life. But what would happen if your instinct was like, oh, hey, this is cool? And you start to explore things and it's a very different response. Or like, oh, wow, I run into something. Or like, oh, heaven forbid, I see it and I move out of the way before running into it. If you train your body to do something over and over and over like that, and it becomes an instinct, imagine what would happen if the things that you used to call negative, the stuff that's happening in the world around you, stuff you're hearing about on the news, if before you used to have an instinctive response that was like, worry, pain, surprise, fear, whatever else it is, and that instinctive response was like, oh, cool, that happened. How much does everything that happens after that change? When your body does it on its own, you are now free to focus your actual conscious mind on living the life you've always wanted. Make it an instinct. Now that you've made it an instinct, we're to number 8. Your body is the single greatest gift and tool you've ever been given on the planet. Not only does it qualify you to be alive, and the only thing that does, if you handle it right, if you just treat it the way it's designed, your mind and body can produce automatic happiness and freedom and joy in any situation, anytime, anywhere, and they can do things you never imagined possible. But that's if you start to see that your body is not your enemy, that it's not what's out there that's the problem. It's that when you handle this, when you're finally at home inside, then everywhere you go is home. Hey folks, you ever lost your keys? We're here to point number 9. Point number 9 is that seeing clearly will set you free. Here's the deal. If you've ever lost your keys, you have them in your pocket, you're running around the house, you're blaming everybody else for what's going on, you're uptight, you're going to be late for your meeting and all that stuff. One time you finally reach your hand around and you realize the keys slid to the side and you're like, oh, my bad. And all of that negative feeling goes away. In like manner, all of the problems you struggle with, all the mental and emotional struggles, everything else, they go away like that. The moment you see through the story, just like we said, thoughts are not things. Your story is just a story. It's a thought, it's a story, like a smell's a smell. They're just little bits of things going on inside of your brain. It's not reality as a whole. When you can see through the story and you have this realization because you saw with your real eyes, all of a sudden, all of the negativity evaporates. But that requires challenging your own thoughts and your own feelings and challenging all the authorities who've told you that that's the way things are as well. All right, guys, last point. What entertains you, trains you. Where your mind goes, your life flows. What you turn into, okay? Every part of your life, where you focus is your locus, okay? Here's the deal. You can think about all the stuff that's happened to you. You can think about all of your negative emotions. You can sit there and list them, and you can feel the feels, and you can be vulnerable. And that's you spending time putting your body in a state that's feeling that way. You don't want to suppress it, but as quickly as possible, you want to see through it. And then ask yourself, okay, where do I want to go from here? You don't have to fix anything. There is no past to fix. There isn't some past version of yourself running around. It's just you here and now. You got it? So instead of spending your time wallowing in and feeling the feelings and everything else, I know a lot of people talk about this. It is misguided because you're training your mind to stop every time you have a negative feeling instead of using that as an indicator that like, oh, something's going off. Let's just adjust and move forward. And you will discover that when you do that, you've trained yourself to live in joy automatically. If this has been helpful, you want to learn more about it, check out my podcast or go over to thefreedomspecialist.com that has links to the podcast and other online programs and anything else. The key is here. You deserve to find joy and happiness. It's your birthright. You were built for freedom. The question is, when will you learn how to access that?